Good morning. We are live at the Stephenson Cancer Center at OU Medicine. My name is Jennifer Schultz. I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications for OU Medicine. Thank you for tuning in as we make a couple of very exciting announcements that will affect the health of cancer patients in Oklahoma and in the region. We have several speakers lined up for you this morning, and we'll be offering the media the opportunity to text in questions for the participants after the presentation. Up first, I'm happy to welcome Dr. Robert Mannel, the director of the Stephenson Cancer Center at OU Medicine. Dr. Mannel?
Well, thank you, Jennifer. 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women in Oklahoma will hear the words, "You have cancer." Unfortunately, 35% will die from their disease. The Stephenson Cancer at OU Medicine has a focused vision to eliminate cancer. Our mission to do this by providing patient-centered, research-driven, multidisciplinary cancer care. Now, these are more than just words. The concept of research-driven cancer care is at the heart of the work of the over 1,000 physicians, scientists, and staff who work at the Stephenson Cancer Center. A major driving force behind eliminating cancer is the National Cancer Institute, and a primary component of this institute is the National Clinical Trials Network. This NCI network is composed of over 2,000 cancer treatment centers worldwide. It is my pleasure to announce that Stephenson Cancer Center at OU Medicine is once again #1 in enrolling patients in clinical trials for the NCI's National Clinical Trials Network. Now, I've been up this podium a few times before, and in case you haven't been counting, this is the 4th year in a row that we have led the nation and received this recognition. Over the past year, Stephenson Cancer Center enrolled 330 patients into this network's clinical trials. Now, that's nearly 100 more than the next closest participant. The National Comprehensive Cancer Network states the best treatment for any patient with a cancer diagnosis is on a clinical trial. Part of our mission is to give Oklahomans access to these trials. They can feel confident that they have the widest array of options and the most innovative therapy right here at home. 1 in 4 patients at Stephenson Cancer Center is treated on a clinical trial. Stephenson offers trials ranging from early phase to late phase, allowing patients to access new drugs and therapies at all stages of investigation. The Oklahoma TSET Phase 1 program at Stephenson, the only cancer Phase 1 program in the state, allows patients to enroll in first-in-human trials to receive new drugs, often years before they become widely available. Now, this has only been made possible due to the commitment of several key players: the state of Oklahoma, the University of Oklahoma, the Tobacco Settlement Endowment and Trust, OU Medicine, University Hospital Authority and Trust, the American Cancer Society, and the philanthropic and advocacy community of our state. Stephenson patients are being treated for many different types of cancer through clinical trials. And by taking part in these research studies, they are not only receiving the highest quality cancer care, but are contributing to the future of cancer treatment. Clinical trials have led to life-saving new cancer treatments. In 1950, 2/3 of patients who had a new cancer diagnosis eventually succumbed to their disease. By the 1970s, this had dropped to 50%. But I said earlier, even as far as we've come today, 35% of our patients with a cancer diagnosis will still die of their disease. We need to do better, and the only way to do that is through clinical trials. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Kathleen Moore. She's the Associate Director of the Clinical Research at Stephenson, and she will announce some exciting news that will help us increase our ability to provide clinical trials to Oklahoma's cancer patients. Dr. Moore.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mannel, and good morning. On behalf of the Stephenson Cancer Center Clinical Trials Office, it's my great pleasure to announce that the Stephenson Cancer Center has been invited and in fact competed to be a part of two new NCI networks of clinical trials. The first, and I'll talk about them individually, the first expands our access to what we call early phase clinical trials. So these are trials exploring new drugs across all cancer types that have not yet been widely tested in patients. And the second, very excitingly, is a network that tests interventions, which might be a new screening test or a new drug, to try and prevent cancers in individuals who are at risk for developing cancers. So as I mentioned, our cancer center and our team took part in two very competitive processes to become a part of these networks. The first network is the Experimental Therapeutics Clinical Trials Network. We call it the ETCTN. And the second is the Cancer Prevention Clinical Trials Network. And both of these together will increase the access to clinical trials, not only for our patients who are currently suffering with cancer, but also for people in Oklahoma in whom we're trying to prevent the development of cancer. Now, participation in what we call the ETCTN, or the Experimental Therapeutics Clinical Trials Network, is actually, there's only 8 of those grants that were awarded in the United States, and we are part of one. It puts us into collaboration with other high-impact cancer centers nationwide. And so our pod of collaborating institutions includes Yale Cancer Center, Columbia in New York City, Washington University in St. Louis, University of California, San Diego, and Vanderbilt in Nashville. And with these collaborating institutions, we'll be able to participate in earlier phase clinical trials and bring those trials to Oklahoma City for where our patients can access some very novel therapies for both patients with solid tumors, so those are things like lung cancer or breast cancer or colon cancer, but also hematologic cancers such as leukemia and lymphomas. And so this really represents an amazing opportunity to increase the access to novel therapies across the board for the citizens of Oklahoma. And we're very grateful and really couldn't have participated in this trial without the support of the TSET, the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust, who established our phase 1 early phase drug development unit and continues to support it. Because we have that infrastructure here and it is well established, we were able to successfully compete for this grant. And so that is really building on our past successes, and we are very grateful for that support. The Cancer Prevention Clinical Trials Network is actually a very new opportunity for us as a cancer center and us as a state to offer clinical trials aimed at basically trying to prevent our citizens from having to ever be our patient. We want to prevent cancers in Oklahoma, and this comes through clinical research as to new drug interventions or new screening trials that are aimed both at patients who are at higher risk for cancers because of maybe genetic risk, or for the population in general. And before you can roll things out to screen everyone in their PCP's clinic, we have to make sure that they're safe and effective and do what we think that they're doing, and that comes through clinical trials. And so our participation in the Cancer Clinical Trials Prevention Network will help us move some of those hopefully effective interventions into play. This is also a consortium of participating sites, cancer centers that have been long participating in prevention trials, and offers us the unique opportunity to build on their experience to push out our prevention programs here in Oklahoma as well. So the other important thing about opening a prevention network in Oklahoma is that we're a very incredible state. We're a very unique state. We're a rural state. We have a very unique ethnic diversity. And so if we're developing prevention drugs or new screening technologies, they have to work for all Americans and not just for those that live in big cities. And so it's incredibly important that we have this network open in Oklahoma so that we can make sure that these prevention strategies work for everybody. So a great opportunity for our state. And so with that, I'd like to now introduce Dr. Jason Sanders, who's our provost and senior vice president at OU Health Sciences Center. Dr. Sanders will talk about what it means for all Oklahoma to have a research-driven academic medicine campus.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Thank you, Dr. Mantle. With our virtual presentation today. We don't have our normal applause, but if you please think with me of how fortunate we are to have Dr. Moore and Dr. Mantle. Hopefully you've seen them before in our earlier communications. As Dr. Mantle mentioned, the 4th year in a row to lead the nation in clinical trials. These are the individuals who put countless hours with their teams to bring these unique opportunities to Oklahoma. These are the people that we talk about of investing in our state, of bringing treatments to our state that can't be found elsewhere. So our huge appreciation for the countless hours of work of Dr. Moore and Dr. Mantle. I hope that those who are listening today have a chance to meet them sometime. It's amazing, their passion, and every word that you've heard today and before is what they live by and what is lived by here by the team at the Cancer Center. I want to talk, as Dr. Moore mentioned, about what it means to be an academic health center and to highlight the way the Stephenson Cancer Center illustrates what we are achieving today and our vision for the future. As you know, the Stephenson Cancer Center is Oklahoma's only National Cancer Institute designated cancer center. So it's one of the nation's elite centers, and as you heard Dr. Moore mention, the names of the people that we collaborate with. And not just collaborate, but the National Cancer Institute calls leaders here, calls Dr. Moore, calls Dr. Mantle for what they think and where the nation should go. The Stephenson Cancer Center with this designation is in the top 2% of cancer centers in the country. It is the largest and most comprehensive oncology practice in our state, delivering patient-centered, multidisciplinary care. And as you've heard before in previous announcements we've made, hopefully you see our values. We're going to have a patient, which I have a privilege to introduce at the end, to really tell the story, because that's why we're all here. And I think her words will resonate the most with our audience. Stephenson also has an award, which we announced last summer, as a ranking by U.S. News and World Report to be one of the top 50 cancer hospitals in the country. Since becoming NCI designated in 2018, the Stephenson Cancer Center has significantly increased its options for patients to receive advanced treatments and participate in clinical trials. So in this room, just over 2 years ago, we had the director of the National Cancer Institute, and we talked at that point about what a milestone it was, but how we were looking for a trajectory for the future. And I hope that today's announcement, again, 4 years in a row, leading the nation in clinical trials, the new experimental trials network, the new preventive cancer network, shows our commitment and our promise of the trajectory we set in 2018, and we're not stopping today either. We're pushing forward. One of the nation's leading research organizations. So Stephenson takes the latest innovations to fight and eliminate cancer. And in particular, for an academic health center, it's emblematic of combining the research and clinical care. As Dr. Mantle mentioned, we believe that the best care for patients is the option to participate in clinical trials. So what does this mean for Oklahoma as a whole to have this resource, this unique resource here in our state? We have more than 100 experts specializing in the diagnosis and treatment of all kinds of cancer. Combined with those experts, nearly 150 researchers, scientists, investigators conducting research in basic, clinical, behavioral, population research, the whole range of trying to prevent cancer in the first place, diagnosing it when it does occur, and treating it, and being patient-centered. Oklahomans now know, hopefully you know, and that's why these announcements are so important. If you didn't know beforehand, you don't have to leave Oklahoma to get the best care. That's what being an NCI designated cancer center means, is what these new announcements mean, that the National Cancer Institute calls Dr. Moore and calls Dr. Mantle and says, what are the best ideas? That is here right in Oklahoma. Our researchers here, over 150, are working on more than 250 active cancer research projects supported by $50 million of annual research funding from the National Institutes of Health, the American Cancer Society, and others. And I want to underscore a previous point of our appreciation for the truly landmark decision years ago to establish the Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust, TSET, which hopefully you have heard about, that vision many years ago got us to where we are today and is critically needed going forward to sustain these new treatments and access to care for Oklahomans. Because we're a multidisciplinary academic health center, we have researchers just across the street in our biomedical research buildings who today, and that's one thing to highlight, during the entire response to COVID, Stephenson Cancer Center has been operational and running. Cancer doesn't wait. So our clinicians, our researchers, all during this time have been seeing patients and doing research, and today they're poring over data, peering through microscopes at the laboratory bench conducting research. These laboratory experiments harness the knowledge from basic sciences to produce new drugs, new devices, and new treatments for patients. This research in our laboratories often translates into clinical research, which is why the NCI and our peer institutions look to us for leadership of that translational bench-to-bedside research. Clinical trials are extension of the laboratory research, and this is the phase that we're announcing today, and we're so excited to bring those ideas and new treatments directly to patients. Access to clinical trials can mean literally a new chance at life, a new chance for improved quality of life. This is why we're here. This is what is meaningful to patients, to those in our audience, to those who've been affected by cancer personally, or who have loved ones who are affected by cancer, or with the sobering statistic that Dr. Mantle mentioned, unfortunately, that still is in the future of many Oklahomans as much as we're trying to prevent cancer in the first place. Thanks to the research conducted on this campus and access to important NCI clinical trials through the networks announced today, the Stephenson Cancer Center patients have opportunities, often life-saving, to participate in trials they may not receive not only elsewhere in the state, but elsewhere in the region or the country. Truly a unique resource for Oklahomans. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today one of the patients to tell us about her experience on a clinical trial, Ms. Deborah Winters, patient of Dr. Kathleen Moore.
Good morning. Thank you very much. When I want to start by saying that this is not a journey that you actually want to take by yourself. You want a support group that's around you, and I have a fantastic support team that's around me. Without them, I'm not sure I would have done as well as I have done. And you have to have faith and hope that the people that are around you are there to support you and to help you along. When I was diagnosed with stage 4 uterine cancer, I didn't know which way was up. But as I said, my family stepped right up. They were with me every step of the way. I began my treatments in November of 2017, just barely a month after being diagnosed. And then a tragedy hit. I had a stroke in December. And so, but I overcame it. I'm up, and I got up and I'm well and running around and working, and I went back on my treatments. After a few months, this wasn't working, and after speaking with the doctor, and she told me to get ready, that there probably wasn't anything that could be done. And I told her I wasn't going to give up the fight, because this is a fight. You cannot give up. And I was going to fight. And so she said, I'm going to fight with you. And we went, and she found another drug, and it was supposed to shrink my tumor. It was an immunotherapy drug, and it was supposed to shrink my tumor and to give me a better quality of life. But it didn't work that way. It shrank it, and it shrank it some more, and then it shrank it till it was all gone. There wasn't anything left. And I stayed on that treatment as a preventative measure because I have a propensity to get cancer again, and I did. But before I go down that one, I'm going to sidetrack a little bit and tell you about a gentleman that walked into my life 47 years ago, after 47 years. We both had been married over 30 years, had our families, And he was my childhood sweetheart. We dated when we were in high school. And he came back to say goodbye because he didn't know I had overcome my cancer and that I was in remission. And he stayed around, and he's been through my second fight. And when I was diagnosed again in the summer of 2019, they came to me and said they have a new drug on the clinical trials. Didn't even have a name yet, it just had a number. And I told them, of course, I'm not gonna give up. I won't ever give up. I'll fight with you, and they fought with me. And I know that I'm in my second remission now because it's gone again. And I'm still on the trial to make sure we keep it in a preventative mode. But more than being in remission is the quality of care that you get here at Stephenson's Cancer Center. I have never felt alone, and I have felt that there were people that were fighting with me. Because that's what it is. I'm going to say it again. It's a fight. You fight for your life. I have always felt that the doctors and nurses here treat more than just your body. They treat your mind and soul. They want to make sure you understand just what's going on 24/7, every day, and no question is too small to ask. These wonderful persons have been in my corner every step of the way. With them going the distance with you, it eases your mind, and they have held my hand the entire way. I've had faith in them and have received hope for the future. I just want to end by saying that I want to thank every person that is up here today, that is upstairs, that has had a part in this journey and in this life force that has been with me. My family, of course, but especially Charlie, my brother JD, my Aunt Carol, my sons Kenneth and Daniel, and my daughter-in-law Christy. They have all just never left me. But also my church family and the family that I've gained right here at Stephenson's. I now know through all of my connections that I have been prayed for by so many people. I know that my Lord put me in the capable hands of the people you see around me now. I will forever be grateful for everything they have given me. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Deborah. We do have some questions from the media, so this concludes our formal presentation. As the questions come in, we will have our speakers come up and answer. And so the first one is probably a good question for Dr. Mantle. It is, how is it that a center in Oklahoma leads the nation in clinical trials?
Thank you, Jennifer. That's a great question. We are not a large cancer center by national standards. We're considered relatively small. You know, Oklahoma is not New York City. It's not LA, Chicago, Dallas. But you know what Oklahoma is filled with, and that's people who are committed to the state of Oklahoma, and the staff, physicians, scientists were able to work with the community, as Provost Sanders mentioned, the state of Oklahoma, Tobacco Settlement Endowment Trust, the philanthropic community, and others, to create the resources and the infrastructure that allowed us to say to all Oklahomans, you can have access to the cutting edge care. You do not have to leave the state of Oklahoma to get the best cancer care possible. You know, Jennifer, interestingly, 40% of our patients that are treated at the Stephenson come from more than 50 miles away. This is a big state. It's got a large rural population. We're here for the entire state of Oklahoma and this region of the country. So I think you see us leading is because we walk the walk. Our vision and mission statement are not hollow words. They're mission critical. It's what we've been recruited and requested to achieve, and I think it shows that with the passion and commitment of individuals like Dr. Moore and the countless other physicians and scientists here, and the giving nature and the fight that are in the citizens of Oklahoma allows us to be successful at offering this resource.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mantle. Another question is around the phases of clinical trials that Dr. Moore had mentioned. Can you explain the research phases like phase 1 and phase 2, and what does that mean?
Sure, thank you for that question. When we develop, as investigators in oncology and even outside oncology, when you develop new therapeutic agents, and those might be chemotherapies or immunotherapies or targeted agents, vaccines, etc., it goes through this kind of pathway of development, first in petri dishes and then in animals, and extensive modeling in a variety of animal models to make sure that it's safe to use in humans as much as we can tell, and that we know what doses to use. Once that extensive process is done, then we can move it into human testing, and so that's the beginning of phase 1. So phase 1 testing incorporates what we call first-in-human studies, and we run those here at Stephenson Cancer Center, and we actually have put the first human being on an asset ever in the world right here in Oklahoma. That particular asset is currently in a phase 3 study, now trying to go for FDA indication, if that gives you any indication of the impact of our little cancer center. So first in human, first person ever to get the drug. When we run those studies, you give a little bit of the drug, and then you kind of escalate until you figure out what dose and what schedule to use that particular drug in. And then phase 1 also includes, once you've figured that out, maybe using it in combinations with known or other experimental agents, or trying to figure out different sequencing. All of that falls into kind of that phase 1 clinical trial, where you're really trying to understand the best dosing and scheduling, and in whom that drug should be used, if at all. Sometimes you do that and you decide the drug shouldn't move forward. Then once you decide that, it moves into phase 2. So phase 2 testing, the drug's side effect profile, and basically the dose and the schedule, and you have some idea in whom you should use it, and that might be in a certain disease type like breast cancer, or more commonly, it may be in a certain molecular subtype, like a certain mutation that a patient may have, like a BRCA mutation or an ERBB2 amplification. So molecular subtypes, and it doesn't matter what kind of cancer you have, but then you do a phase 2 study with maybe 100 patients to make sure it works, and you get a signal of efficacy. And if it passes that bar, it moves into phase 3, and that's where you kind of see the New England Journal papers when they work, where you're taking your new drug and you're comparing it to whatever the established standard of care is and trying to prove that it's better. So phase 3 studies are kind of the end of the development pathway, trying to get it into commercial usage for patients. And we run all of those phases of studies here. I oversimplified it, but it's important to have access to phase 1 trials here, because oftentimes phase 2 and 3 studies are very restricted in who can come on. Maybe you can only come on a study if you've had 1 or 2 or maybe 3 lines of prior therapy. Well, our patients are living 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 lines of therapy, but they don't have any treatment options. And in phase 1, we have a lot more leeway in allowing patients who looks great, but maybe has had a lot of lines of therapy to access a novel drug that may help them. So it opens up access to potentially effective therapeutic options for our patients, and they don't have to travel to another state or 2 states away to access those. So I think that's sort of the nutshell of that.
We do have a couple questions for Deborah, if you're comfortable. So the question is were you nervous at all to be a part of a clinical trial or to be on a drug that did not yet have a name? What was that like?
Actually, no, I wasn't nervous. It was a next step. That process of faith and hope that you have in the doctors. I really wasn't nervous at all. It was what we were going to use to overcome or try to overcome the cancer.
Another question is around the types of trials inside of these two new networks. What types of cancers do these trials have the best success in?
So the Experimental Therapeutics Clinical Trials Network will offer clinical trials potentially across all disease types. The palette, which is sort of the trials that are open right now, we're actually looking at now and trying to decide what would best suit our patient population. So really, if you look at the palette or menu of studies that are open, it covers almost every disease type, both hematologic and solid tumors. We're particularly interested in trials that meet our catchment area, what's important in Oklahoma. A lot of these studies target rare tumors where clinical trials otherwise don't exist. We want to get those open here so our patients who have rare tumors that otherwise would either not have trial opportunities or would have to travel, they can stay right here and get access to those trials. Or there are diseases that have a particular burden in Oklahoma, such as colorectal cancer and cervical cancer, head and neck. Those particular studies, if there's something that's very interesting in that network, we're going to move to open those. So from an access standpoint, we're trying to tailor what's open to our catchment area and what's important to our people. What will be most successful? We just don't really know yet. We certainly are going to open studies. These are all studies that are vetted by the National Cancer Institute, so they've gone through pretty rigorous review and are felt to be incredibly promising. So that level of review has already happened, and we're really looking at them in terms of what best fits our population. And I think the same is true for the prevention trials. We're going to be looking to open prevention trials that aim to prevent cancers that are very prevalent in our people. So tobacco-related cancers, colorectal cancers, et cetera, things that are really prevalent in Oklahoma. And we unfortunately do have some hot spots in terms of diseases that are disproportionately common in our citizens. Those are the trials we're going to be looking to open first so we can really impact our community. But eventually, we may have many beyond that open as well.
The next question is for Dr. Mantle, and it's about the Cancer Center and access to cancer treatment during our response to COVID-19 and how that may be changed, along with how that potentially impacted people being able to access clinical trials.
Well, certainly the COVID pandemic has changed the way American medicine practices, changed more than just medicine. It's changed all of our lives with social distancing and everything that we all experience. But as was mentioned earlier, cancer is going to continue regardless of the COVID pandemic. That's the reality. And so we made the commitment early on that we were going to keep our doors open, we were going to keep seeing our patients, we were going to keep offering access to clinical trials. Now we had to change the way we did that. We made some very difficult decisions, such as when patients come to our building, they couldn't bring their support system with them. That was a difficult decision to make. Masking, hand washing, washing the building, all those things that were good medical practice. We screen all of our patients before they enter into the building and set up a COVID task force. Having said that, we feel confident in saying that one of the safest places to be in the midst of the COVID crisis is actually here because of the extraordinary precautions the staff, the physicians, and the patients take in order to protect one another. So we kept and maintained a large clinical presence and clinical trials presence, and it's once again was due to the commitment and passion of the people that were here. We also embraced telemedicine to a much greater extent, and that was helpful in trying to reduce the crowding in the building, and I think that will continue in the future.
The next question is for Deborah, and it is the question of what has your experience been like coming to Stephenson Cancer Center during the COVID-19 response?
Actually, it didn't really change a whole lot, except that I couldn't bring the support system with me. I've always had someone that was here every single time, whether it be my brother or my Aunt Carol or one of my sons or my daughter-in-law or Charlie. They were with me every time I came. Someone was always with me. And so coming alone and then having to sit up here by yourself, sometimes it's just not really fun. But you do what you have to do to make sure that you can take that next step forward and go for the next day.
Excellent. Thank you, Deborah. So this concludes our questions from the media, which will then conclude our program. We will be rolling out additional information and materials for the media. If there's further questions or information you need, feel free to contact our media team. But otherwise, have a great day. Thank you.